Change is all around us. As leaders, we are forced to deal with changes thrust on us, but we are also charged with creating change. It is the latter that we're focused on today, creating change, more specifically, creating meaningful change. Are you ready for that? I hope so, because that's where we're headed, and I'm glad that you're here. Welcome to another live episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you're listening to this podcast, you could have been here live. So if you want to know more about how to do that, so you can get those future episodes and be with us and contribute as a live participant, you can learn more by going to our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. Today's episode is brought to you by Remarkable Development Sessions. A Remarkable Development Session is a webinar for a new world. We know that we learn in interaction with others, but in a fractured and increasingly virtual world, the workshop experience has been shifted to a focus on simply delivering the content, leaving the application to you as an individual. And so even if you love learning from webinars, you've likely thought that there's got to be a way to make a webinar better than it already is. And if you've thought that, I hope that you'll join us for a future one of these sessions. You can learn more by going to kevineikenberry.com/remarkable development to learn more and to register for an upcoming session, a valuable skill. And with that, it's time for me to bring in our guest. Mike Morrison is here. You can see him. I see some of you commenting. I'll get back to those in a second, but let me introduce you to our guest first. His name is Mike Morrison. He is the founder of University of Toyota, and his consulting and coaching work has taken him around the globe in service of helping a range of leading enterprises. He's also served as a senior scientist for the Gallup organization. He's the author of Leading Through Meaning, a philosophical inquiry, The Other Side of the Card, and This Is Not Working. He's also the co-author of his newest book, Creating Meaningful Change, which we're going to talk about today. He resides in Los Angeles with his wife, Carrie, and their 3 cats. Their children, Zach and Mackenzie, live in New York and LA, and he is our guest today. Mike, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to be here with everyone.
And so let's see, we've got, it's noon in San Francisco and it's 1 p.m. in Phoenix. And so I'm saying good day, or I may have said good afternoon when I shouldn't have. So we got people from all over. And people are now saying it's noon. Thank you, Dwayne, for giving us the time in Seattle. At least I didn't ask people for the weather, Mike. So let's start here. And you didn't wake up when you were 12 and say, I'm going to be the founder of University of Toyota. You didn't think about writing about change and helping organizations around the world. So sort of what led you to this work, if you will?
Wow, that's a great question. I was real lucky to get on with Toyota in those early years when it just was starting to make a footprint in the U.S. And I got my dream job while I was there to be the dean and founder of the University of Toyota. It was during that time in the late 90s when organizations wanted to play more offense with learning. Lots of training going on, but not all of it really sticking. And the need for leadership became even more important. So it was fun. It was fun to be for a decade to launch and lead, those learning efforts for a wonderful organization.
So this new book, the latest book, and I'm afraid I might sneeze here. Excuse me.
Bless you.
So this new book, Creating Meaningful Change, tell us what the big idea of the book is.
This notion that change is inevitable, but meaningful change isn't. And it's trying to create simple ideas and simple frameworks for how would we bring more meaning to our work. It's what people essentially want. So how do we do that in simple ways? So we've created some simple frameworks. All these have been bench tested with real organizations over the last 10 years. So the idea was to write a simple 100-page book that inspires and helps people think about change, whether it's something that would have been transactional, like a cost-cutting effort, to some new direction in an organization. How do we kind of get people excited about what the potential is? And again, using very simple frameworks that we can kind of keep in our head.
And we're going to talk about some of those as we go, of course. Uh, Mike, it's interesting. The title of the book is Creating Meaningful Change. That also is your definition of leadership. And so I'd like you to talk about that a little bit more, because I think it's an interesting definition, and I think it'll be instructive for you to unpack that for us just a little bit.
Yeah, if you think about it, as many people as there are in the room, there'll be different leadership definitions. And so all of them probably make sense in some way and reflect someone's experience. But we wanted to create, or I wanted to create about 10 years ago, a simple definition. It's actually on the, it was on the wall at the University of Toyota, but get it down to 3 words, 3 simple words we can remember. So if you think about it, managing is making things work well, looking behind us, making sure people are prepared. But creating meaningful change, right, is this notion of not just ordering it or commanding it, but really facilitating, creating it, something meaningful, right, purposeful, makes sense, and then change. And that's the real work of leaders. So that's been our simple definition, our mantra for leadership, that hopefully helps people kind of have a, be able to connect with it right away and think about their leadership roles in that sense.
Perfect. So we all think about change a lot. It's one of the 3 words, but that word in the middle, I think we ought to spend a little time on that. So
Sure.
The word meaning, you spend some time in the book talking about it. I think it's important. I have been saying that as leaders, we must become meaning makers.
Right.
And so I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you mean when you use that word? You very intentionally use the word meaning. What does meaning mean?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to our simple change formula. If you think of 3 words, right? Three elements to it: wayfinding, finding our way; sense making, making sense out of things; and then self-developing along the way. And if you think about all of our ancestors, it's the most prevalent elements of our lives, right? People wanted to find ways, so they find, they got on ships, they started exploring, and then they had to make sense out of these adventures, right? Continuously, while developing themselves. And if you think of the pandemic that we just went through, almost immediately we had to start doing some sense making. What does this mean for me, my work, my family, my friends? What does this mean? And we were all kind of thrust into that to make sense, right? To do some sense making around it. And then as we kind of got our foundations, then it was a little bit of wayfinding. What does this mean for my business, my work? How do I do this remotely? So most people really develop new skills, new mindsets, new attitudes to work toward, their personal life during that process, because it wasn't a month, it wasn't a storm we had to weather. It was a change in the weather pattern. Things have changed significantly, as a result. So if you think of the pandemic, it was one of these meaning-making opportunities that also was, wrought with challenge and some loss and other things. But typically that's when human beings are at their best, when they're thrown in these larger challenges, and then they get to do the meaning-making process. Well, of course, that happens every day in our work lives too, small and large opportunities to grow ourselves, grow the people around us, grow our business in some new ways. So we like to think it's very intuitive, it's historical, it's a natural process that we all kind of go through every day.
So talk about the third of the 3. We talked about wayfinding and sense making. Talk a little bit more about self-developing as it relates to change specifically.
Yeah, it's it kind of goes back to the whole notion, be the change you seek. Be the change you seek. If you want your organization to be more customer focused, then you have to model that. You have to be that. It's just not something we command to others. But part of that process is uh, developing the new skills and mindsets that come with the change, and that's pretty exciting. We define it in two buckets, the me and we. And we need both. We need a strong me. We need people to be differentiated and willing to take chances and challenge things. So we definitely need that strong me leadership. And then we need that strong we as well, where we can subordinate our own personal needs to the larger group needs, where we can draw people in and include them in ways that really promote the larger goals that we're trying to achieve. So we always say to people, sometimes it's about you. You need to be strong and bring your voice. And sometimes it's not about you. You need to be cultivating others in the process.
I would go as far as to say that when we figure out when it's me and when it's we is when we start to become more effective, truly more effective as a leader. Some people never get out of one or the other bucket, right? Many people recognize that they need to do both, but having the wisdom and the awareness to know when we should be where our focus should be is, I think, part of the maturation process as a leader. Comments? You're sort of nodding with me. Comments?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it's one of those great tensions, because almost sometimes on the spot in a meeting, we're trying to figure out, is this about me right now, where I need to kind of take charge and make a statement? Or is this about we? Is this more about process, uh, bringing in some new voices and making it bigger than me? So it's that tension is always there. And great leaders, right? Effective leaders know how to kind of in the moment make those kind of navigations.
I love that. And I love that idea of tension. I talk about it a lot, about thinking about the rubber band almost, right? If
Yeah.
you will. So we're talking, by the way, everyone, if you've just joined us, with with Mike Morrison, the co-author of the wonderful new book, Creating Meaningful Change. And you won't have to listen long to realize that this is a short book you need a copy of. And so one of the things that I can't say that I highlighted it, because I did read this digitally in a PDF, as it turns out. But one of the things that caught my eye, and that is something I completely agree with, and I want you to just comment on it. You said that nothing changes until we do. So say more about that.
Yeah, it kind of goes to that third bucket of the self-discovery, self-developing. Uh, most most of the change where we're asking others to change, it's really facilitated by the change they see in us. That's often a question people start to try to figure out when change comes in their organization. Is this the flavor of the month? Is this something that someone's trying out, or do they really believe in it? So, below the surface of this initial, behaviors and announcements, we're all pretty good at trying to figure out that in our dog sense, right? Is this a real deal? Is this something I can get behind? And we need to do that with ourselves. We need to often challenge ourselves to take some of those first steps. It's part of that me process, but take some of those first steps to start really being that change we seek. All of us have extensive to-do lists, right? But I always encourage people to have a to-be list and have one thing on it at a time. Don't do the crazy to-do list thing we do, where we have hundreds of things we're chasing, and it's part of our contemporary lives. But have that to be that really kind of starts to highlight for our own internal public who we're trying to become in this process. People love that. People love authentic, down to earth, vulnerable, accessible leaders.
You talk about having a to-be list, which I love, because after all, we are human beings, as it
Right.
turns out. So you hinted at something and you kind of moved past it, but I want to go back to it.
Sure.
I put a little pin in it in my head. Uh, Most everyone, really everyone who is watching us now or listening to us later, uh, is a leader in the middle. I
Yeah.
mean, even if you're a CEO, you've got a board. Even when you're the company owner
Right.
like me, I got a wife, right?
Right.
So like everyone's a leader in the middle, right?
Right.
Somewhere. And so sometimes, I hinted at it in the opening when I said sometimes change is thrust upon us. Um, what's your advice um, to leaders at any level when they're being asked to lead a change,
Right.
create a change that they're not sure they agree with?
Yeah, and that's the, that's the, boy, that's a great question. So I think that's where we see a yellow light, right? It's an intersection, right? We need to slow down. And that's where instead of just saying yes or moving forward or being blindly loyal, we really need to, to pause and start to think about, is this really the right thing for our organization? And what are some of the pathways to kind of having a different discussion about, to make sure before we start to really commit and put resources behind it, that it really makes sense. And if you think about it, organizations are political. Of course they are. Some are more political than others, but by political, people are trying to have influence. They're trying to influence others, and they may think that this new project, it might be self-serving, or in their hearts they may believe it makes sense. But I think that's the, part of what the me part of a strong leader is to be willing to hit the pause button, to have a different conversation with others. And it's a little risky, but those around us really appreciate it. It's like, gosh, I wish I could have said that. I love what Kevin, brought up in the meeting. Made sense. We're all thinking it, but he had the guts to kind of say it. So
Say,
I think there always is a respectable way to raise issues, slow the process down, and get to the right answer.
gotcha. Another one of the things you talk about in the book, that is not sort of in the normal parlance, right? So it's worth us talking about, is this idea of everydayness, which I really love, by the way.
Yeah.
So what do you mean, Mike, when you say everydayness?
Yeah, the uh, the day is the perfect container. If you think about it, we get to start the day anew. We start with our action list, things we got to get done. But the key is to in everydayness is to really carve out time, even if it's one of those just busy days, to move the meaningful change agenda along, whatever that is. Have one other conversation about that idea to really make sure we save some time. Because at the end of the day, we start to reflect back on those things that were meaningful to us. So we want to make sure at the beginning of the day we've taken time to protect those, to have those things. And then if you think about it, at the end of the day, it's a good time to reflect on the day. What progress did we make? What do we want to push back into to tomorrow with it? Maybe even a little bit more discipline and rigor. So I love the fact that at the end of the day, we can be laptop down, do a little reflection. And then as we go into the night, right, we get this incubation period where we get some separation. And what's really cool is usually when we start a new day, and if we start with that positive mindset, carve out a little time to really think things through, it does feel like a new opportunity, a new set point. So we really live our lives in days, moment by moment, but we live our lives in days, and each day creates this kind of new opportunity that's separated by sleep, by
We
disappearing.
hope,
Well,
we
yeah.
hope that we
Well,
have some sleep, right?
yeah.
So, one of the things, part of the frame, and we got someone saying that that's what he does: make a plan, take the day, build the future.
Yeah.
And I love your idea of calling it a container because you know you and I are having this conversation live, and some of us are here live on the 5th of January. If you're listening to this on the podcast, who knows when you're going to be listening to this?
Right.
But at this time of the year, a lot of people are saying, well, everything that you just described, they want to do now for the year.
Right.
And so many people get frustrated by all of that and didn't really work, and I didn't make the time for it. But when we say I'm going to do this every day, doesn't have to be a long time. But I also loved laptop down, journal out, right? Or however you want to look at that. But certainly laptop down, unplugged, it's super important. But I just love that idea of the day as the perfect container. I just really love that a lot. I've got one more sort of big idea from the book, and then one really big question before we start to round the corner and head toward home.
Great.
And the question from the book relates to what you call the from to journey.
Right.
And I love this framework. So talk about what that means and how we can use that as leaders as it relates to creating meaningful change.
Yeah, I love it too. Talk about creating attention. Senge talk about it in his systems work, but it's the rubber band and between the two hands, and it creates attention. And you have two options. You can either move the bottom hand, the current state, toward the vision, or you can reduce the vision. But something's got to move. I love that simple notion, but the from to journey is really the scientific method. It says, let's get real clear and honest about our current state. And the reason we want to do that is we want to, really promote change this time. And even with our own personal change, sometimes it takes just getting really tired of our own stuff to motivate us to take some movement. Often we have these ideas and aspirations, but sometimes we just have to get tired of our own stuff, but be real clear organizationally, personally, what our current state is. And that should be motivating, right? There's some good things going on, but we've got to move we've got to move. And so the future state obviously is that compelling picture of what we want to achieve. Think of the puzzle box you opened up over the holidays for the family. Everybody knows the mission. You put the thing together, and everyone loves being part of it. But if you lose the cover, if you lose the box, no one wants to do it because they don't have a vision, a picture of what we're all trying to achieve. We can be busy, and often that's what's missing in our own work. We feel like we're busy, we're doing stuff that seems to make sense, but without that compelling picture of the puzzle, our efforts can wane. So we really get key about really defining significantly and with clarity where we're going. And then the betweenness, right? Being between things, being between jobs, relationships, apartments, whatever it is, it can be unsettling, but it's also usually where we have our most growth. That subliminal or that liminal place, that betweenness that can create a little bit of disruption. But the scientific method says, take it a step at a time. Don't rush through the steps. Learn your way there. Have some milestones. Have some next steps that you want to be clear about. But the idea in this from to, it's a journey. It's like the Campbell's hero's journey. We cross into the unknown. We take that step across the threshold, and it's like, yikes. I've quit my job, or I've done this, or I've made this public commitment to this change. I don't know exactly how I'm going to get there, but I'm committed. So the from to is probably one of the most simple frameworks, but you got to get both elements right. Clear about the current state, clear about a compelling future state, and then the willingness to learn your way there.
I want to highlight what you just said about being clear about the future state, because sometimes in organizations we're not. We're defending what we think it ought to be. Going back to process improvement, you and I both have been here, where people are saying, "Well, here's how we do it." No, that's how we have it written down, but that's not how we're doing it, right? And so, getting really clear about what the future state is, and for people who feel no discomfort with the current state, for them to realize, well, it might be fine, but it's certainly not perfect.
Right.
Right. And so I think that is so the from. I mean, we think about the two, but
Right.
we don't always think about the from enough, in my experience. So that's one of the reasons I love that so much. So now the big question
Yep.
is where you earn the big dollars that you make by being a guest on this podcast, Mike.
Yeah.
Which, y'all, it's nothing. Okay.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Organizations are always changing. They're always
Right.
trying to create change. And oftentimes organizations are trying to create really big change, large scale organizational change. And we're not very good at it.
Right.
Why do we mess it up so much?
Well, great question. And we talk a little bit about in the book, it's the 70% is the figure that gets thrown out a lot. It actually is not well documented, but most of us would agree with it. That anywhere between 70 and 90% of most change efforts don't meet, don't meet their expectations. And a lot of it goes back to the from to really framing for everyone this process and the willingness to do the sense making as you go. When we think about creating meaning, there's two parts of it. One is being purposeful, that we're in a hospital and we want to be more patient focused. Whatever that change is, it's being willing to take those incremental steps along the way and involving others in that process. Often, it's some of the things we've already talked about. We don't build that burning platform. We don't create the clear and compelling and then really involve people. It's everydayness for everybody. It's taking the incremental steps every day where it feels like, we're knocking down that thing. It's like the sculptor, right? He sees an angel in that slab and he keeps removing all the little pieces until that angel becomes free. So it's willingness to stay at it, to do it every day. It shouldn't be something like, in 2 weeks, we're going to make more progress on that. No, it's got to be an everydayness. This is the change we're seeking. Little steps, little victories. But at the end of the day, to be able to say, today was a good day. We made some progress. Are we there? No, but we feel like collectively we're working toward this as a group.
Perfect. So I'm going to shift gears before we finish and ask you this, Mike. What do you do for fun?
Well, I'm a avid tennis player. I've been playing my whole life, and tennis is complex enough as a sport that you can't think about anything else while you're playing. I'm a runner too, but when I run, I just kind of rehash all my problems. But tennis is complex enough that I'm just, I can be in the game. So I love that.
Perfect. And the only question I told you I was going to ask is this one. And I have found that, throughout my life, Mike, I've made it a habit when I meet smart people or people that I admire, I want to ask them what they're reading or what they've read. And so when I started this podcast 300 and some episodes ago, I decided to ask people this question. What are you reading? Or what's something you read recently, Mike?
Yeah, something I just started is this book. It's just called Sapiens. It's kind of who we are, kind of a brief history of humankind. And I've always, I just returned from a trip to Eastern Europe, and it's fascinating to talk to people about just their experience growing up in a communist rule. First, the Nazi wartime efforts, but how they adapted and how they, their view of the world and how they survived it. But I find all those stories fascinating. This book goes even farther back, but it kind of helps to frame, why we're so anxious, why we are who we are. So talk about big picture. Also makes you feel a little insignificant, in terms of the time and size of the world and all that. Puts our little problems into perspective for sure.
If I had far more memory than I do, I could tell you who else who is sat in your seat in this podcast has mentioned that book, but I'll try to find it. I think it's at least one other person, everybody, maybe a couple. I'll see if I can find that, and we'll make note of that in the show notes. on the podcast, because it's not the
Great.
first time that book has been mentioned here. So, Mike, now the question you've been wanting me to ask, like, all right, where can we learn more? Where do we get the book? Where do you want to point us? What do you
Very
want to tell
good.
us?
Yeah, shamelessly promoting, but both my co-author and I, we're not we're not doing this to sell books. We're really doing this to promote ideas. It's been part of our own lifetime journeys, but it's you can read it in 1 or 2 sittings. It captures a lot of the ideas I know that will resonate with you. So you can go to Amazon.com and just search on Creating Meaningful Change, Mike Morrison, or we have a website with other resources called meaningfulchangebook.com. So, and if you link with me on LinkedIn, I'd always be happy to email with you or share ideas. I'd love to have some of your listeners be in my network, my community, and I'm always willing to be a resource, a networking resource to others.
All right, everybody. Mike says he didn't come here so you will buy books. I'm saying you need to go buy a book. Creating Meaningful Change. Mike, thanks so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to have you. Now I have a question for everybody else. Mike can take a deep breath. And here's my question for all of you. It's the most important question of the day. Now what? What are you going to do with what you just learned? There were 50 things that you may have heard today in the last 30 minutes that would make a difference for you, but none of them will make a difference unless you take action. Maybe you got some ideas around the value of a day as the perfect container. Maybe you got some thoughts about creating a to-be list and not just a to-do list. Maybe the idea of the from-to journey makes a difference and can help you with a change that you're leading now. The point here is to take action on something and not just say, man, that was good, or that was interesting, or because until we act, it really doesn't matter. So Mike, thanks again for being here. Such a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
It took us a while to get here. I'm so glad we did. And for all of you that are here, I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope you found it more important than enjoying it. I hope you found it valuable. And most important, I hope it will make a difference for you and the team that you lead. And if it did, then invite others to listen to this podcast. And if you found it useful, I hope you'll come back next week, because we'll be back next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everyone.